Thank you for coming. Ladies and gentlemen, I got Kage, Hervé, Léger here in the building with me. I appreciate you for coming. We're here in LA. You are an icon, right? Or would you be considered a pioneer?
A pioneer is, that's a huge word to, when you think about a pioneer, you talk about the first ones who were there. So when you talk about the Willie Ninjas and you talk about, the different people from, a certain era, a period where it began, those would probably be the pioneers, so I can think of a few of them. When you begin to talk about my father, who was a pioneer, the House of Prodigy, Kevin, a pioneer, where many house birthed from that particular house that he came from the Mecca, which was New York. And when you talk about a pioneer, even though you can pioneer some things, I come very close to the borderline, but I would never use that when describing myself other than being an icon, and probably one of the first peoples in the Midwest to kind of help push that platform of first icons coming out, but not as a pioneer.
Who would you consider to be some of the pioneers of the Midwest?
Well, I think some of the pioneers of when I talk about my time, there were pioneers pre-era, pioneers. They were just a little bit older than I was. So when you talk about Ballroom and the existence of Ballroom and the time that it came out, so we go back to the early 80s or the early 70s. I wasn't walking in the 70s, even though I was born in 1963. I didn't start walking my first ball until like 1987, 88, 89. And then from that venture, that's where I began to balloon and kind of pick up where they kind of left off or kind of begin to replicate the things that I had saw in Ballroom.
Okay, so, and where are you from originally?
I'm originally from Detroit City.
That's what's up. I am too.
That's my home. That's the birthplace.
Describe, I guess, like the beginnings of the Detroit scene.
Wow, I mean, Detroit has some very rich history and recalls of Ballroom. I can go back to the days before there was a Jack, before there was Selvin, there was Eric Christian Bazaar, and we would go to this place that some folks would call it a hole in the ground called the Post. And this place became iconic and legendary for Detroit because some of the biggest names in Ballroom who had ever hit the floor at that particular time came through Detroit. The Muglares battled in Detroit. You had to come see us at some point in time, and then you had, our big icons out of Detroit, which Goddess, Rodeo. You had the Cash Money Boys back then. You had the House of Chaos back then. It was a different time, and Ballroom was really, really fun right there. But I don't want to get lost in the sauce because I could talk on forever about that particular segment. But for those individuals like, and I keep bringing up like Ann Dutch. Oh my God, what the Dutch boys did in Detroit can't be replicated anymore. They're not doing that anymore. Here was an all butch queen house, that had they had some female figures, but it was known for being a butch queen house. And to be part of the house had sent a whole ripple through the Ballroom community, and everybody wanted to be a Dutch boy. And I came through Ballroom, and that actually was not my first house. My first house was the House of Ford, which was a fashion-like type of house, and it didn't really exist that long because as soon as I came out, I beat all the Dutch boys the first night I ever walked. My first ball I ever walked, I beat all the Dutch boys. I came out for body. You know what I'm saying? And I beat their father. I beat everybody that night. And after that night, the Dutch boys kind of recruited me low-key. They would come up to my job while I was at McDonald's making the burgers, and they'd be like, what's up? And I was still young to Ballroom, and then I became a Dutch boy. And,
so back then, because I think that was around the time when I first came out. I was a teenager, too young to even be in there. Mm-hmm. And all I remember is just being in the Post, shoulder to shoulder, all night till daylight. Mm-hmm. And then it was I stopped coming out to balls for years, and then when I came back, those same balls would be empty.
Yeah.
And it just seemed like the scene in Detroit kind of died. So from your perspective, what kind of contributed to that that lack of participation?
Well, I think the lack of participation is that we have to look at the diversity of a city first. And when we talk about a city of what has happened to African American people pre-ballroom era versus what has always gone on in black communities, where there's not enough funding for education, there's not enough funding for foods, there's not funding for a lot of different variables within that city that hurts the demographic of African American people, especially for young black African American males who are gay. So instead of being in a gentrified neighborhood that created an economy for us, it kind of took away from us. So we lost Ford Motor Company, we lost Motown Review, we lost so much out of Detroit. So the fabrication of finances were sucked out of Detroit. So you saw what you called a plight to Atlanta, where a lot of people left Detroit and they fled it to Atlanta because there just wasn't any compensation for money there.
Yeah, it's funny because I said that too one time. Like sometimes I feel like the ballroom cities are sometimes a reflection of the actual city. So,
absolutely.
For me, being in middle school and then going to an adult and to basically see the city deteriorate, so to speak, it's kind of like that's kind of what happens to the ballroom scene. Right. Now it seems like it's coming back a little bit. So. What do you think is needed to sustain a ballroom city like Detroit?
Well, we first have to be honest and look at a number of things in regards of how to sustain a ballroom scene and why ballroom even exists in its own core and presence today. Ballroom was manifest out of the necessities of needing a family, the necessities of looking for a job, the necessity of, I don't have a mother, so I'm going to find a mother, and this mother is going to treat me as if she was my mother in ballroom. So now when you look at ballroom as a whole, is that kids are well educated, they have their own jobs, they're in college. These ballroom kids now, opposed to what ballroom kids were, they had a different level. And so they come in out of college with bachelor's degrees. They're coming into ballroom with running their own six-figure business. They're coming into ballroom with their own bags. So how do you teach a grown person now about ballroom when they're so advanced that they're getting all the things that ballroom didn't prescribe to? Let's go back to Paris's Burning, where you had to sleep on the floor. People are still sleeping on floors, but now people are sleeping on condo floors. You see what I'm saying? So it's a lot different. The ballroom has it has reinvented itself. And because it has reinvented itself, it's changed and evolved, and the people around it have to evolve. If you want to be part of ballroom now, you got to have your stuff together. Now you're filling out resumes for Legendary. So it's a whole different thing. The accolades which brought ballroom to the mainstream was poor people, folks who didn't have stuff, people didn't have nothing, food to eat on the street, people going to HIV trucks getting tested, people who died earlier in the 80s. You know what I'm saying? I remember the big explosion about Magic Johnson, where if you was from Detroit, you had to be the trade. You could not be a gay man in Detroit. You had to be the trade. And if you wasn't, you was bashed out. So for me to find a family like the Dutch boys was something that I could hold on to, because I could keep my secret to myself, but yet be around my fellow, ball people that I admired at that time. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's what's up. So, what made you eventually leave the city? What made you?
I'll be very candid with you. I went through a divorce. I was married. I have 3 kids. I was the trade before anything, and people don't understand when you say that word. It's a young man who hasn't found himself, and yet the community will pull on you, but all you know is to be a man who what the community told you had to be. You had to act straight all the time. And so going through that process, I got married, and I wanted to have a family, which I still do have a family, but I was hiding from myself living in the demographics of Detroit. You had to be a thug. And my wife found out, and after my wife found out, we got a divorce, and I went to Atlanta, and I fell in love with the first guy I met, basically, and the ATL for you. And I began to experience this life, this culture, this identity that said I'm part of the LBGT community. I was ready to go, but yet I didn't understand the fundamentals and how to move within that whole, the whole atmosphere of ballroom is wicked sometimes. You think you're coming to ballroom for someone to love you, and at the same time you're getting the same abusiveness within ballroom. A lot of people are scared to have that conversation and what that really looks like, and I think it's a tug of war between ballroom now and reality, because what we see on TV and what we see on Legendary, that's cute. I don't take it away. But real ballroom, the young man who's strung out on drugs, the council city member they were giving millions of dollars to for donations to the Hillary Clinton Foundation, who set up and helped kill a kid right here in California. You know what I'm saying? And so it's just, it's really crazy how politics roll over into ballroom, as well as Hollywood has taken over the mainstream form of ballroom. And then at the end of the day, it's almost like going back to the fields, not using the word, the N-I-G-G word, but I feel like we're going back to the fields, and they've taken everything that we've gained away from us, and we got to go back to the fields and work all over again and build Detroit back up. It's gone. People are losing, everything to ballroom. When I say that they're losing, is that they're losing, where ballroom is losing its true identity to what it really is. They don't go behind the cameras. People think ballroom is real fabulous when it really ain't. Ballroom is the young man on the corner who can't get off of drugs. Ballroom is the corner of the girl who's prostituting every week, but we trying to get her inside. Ballroom is the young man who cannot read or write. You know what I'm saying? Ballroom is the person who wants to be a woman, but yet he thinks he's a man. See, that's ballroom. But when people see it, they're just transgenders, or they're just gay men, and they don't understand the fight to live in this world and all the diversities that are out here between economically, educationally, being black, being transgender is so much. And yet you got to look in the face of a person to tell you that you can't be something and you can't have something and you're no good. And then you go to ballroom and they turn around and prejudge you and tell you the same thing again. And now you're on a panel and you say, I thought these people love me, but they're chopping me. Or I thought these people care for me, but I can't get through. What is it? And then you really learn what shade is about, in the art of shade. You know what I'm saying? So I hope I'm not getting too deep, but I'm just pumped with, with energy so that we really look at what ballroom has done, where ballroom is going, and where will ballroom be? And sometimes we need to put the brakes on and say, hold up, don't rob us and take everything from us. And when you take it to places like Legendary, when you take it to, and you see, and I love, there's another show I haven't watched. It's called, what is it called? Everybody's been talking about it, and it's really sad. Pose. I'm sorry I don't remember the name. But that's just me being real about it. I have never watched the show, and the reason why I don't watch that show, Pose, is because it's not afraid of what I think I might see. It's afraid of that I've been living ballroom all my life. I don't need to look at Pose. I look at myself. I look at the kids in the neighborhood. I look at the people at the centers, the folks who don't got food to eat. Ballroom is, I wish they would shoot a real reality show of real ballroom and get behind the scenes and really see what the rigors are and all of those things right there, because it would be totally different from what people think it is. Ballroom is not a show of all this beauty and all this fantasy. Really is, how do you get, I'm gonna be honest with you, how do you get this young man who's strung out on crack to the ballroom floor to make him appear to look like a Hollywood superstar in that moment? How do you clean them up to get there? And people don't talk about that. But now what you have in ballroom is that you don't have kids who are struggling. People are recruiting kids just because they're cute, or just because they're pretty, or just because they're on Instagram. Let me put you in your house. I want you to be in my house, and you're gonna represent the house of woo, woo, woo. And so now they use people for points, for cash prizes, there is no development anymore. So what's being left behind is that the kids who can't get into ballroom because the criteria and the bar is set so high, because you can't sit with us. You need a bag to sit with us. It's just different, man. So, that's all.
I feel what do you think that we all can do to just make that different, make that better? So it's not like that.
Well, I think it takes people of your character. I think it takes people like you to go after and do, documentaries and hear stories from all likes forms of ballroom, not just from icons and legends, but from kids who walk into ballroom, from kids who are really suffering from the different things and the plights that are going on in the world. Ballroom is a two-sided stone. ballroom was, to me, is not meant for the perfect person who has everything in line. That doesn't mean that that person who has everything in line can be part of the house, but I'm not looking for that kid. I'm not looking for the kid who already have a bachelor's degree and got a penthouse and who can pimp out a car. I'm looking for the kid who wants to be there. And how do we get him from ground zero to there? Because that's what ballroom is about. It's easy to put a whole bunch of fat folks together who look good and take a picture for a pre-op and then go to a ball and win a couple and prizes and laugh. That's not what ballroom was built for. It was built for those who were suffering in society because they didn't have the needs mentally, physically, or educationally to get those things. And so we kind of taught them how to be fashion designers, and we taught them what it will look like to be Vivienne Westwood. And we talked about things in culture begin to develop in a city, and it took over, and everybody wanted to outdo the next person, and it was fun, and it was great energy. You don't have people making clothes anymore. They rent costumes. You know what I'm saying? You don't see people, look on the play of Ballroom where it was versus where it is. People would get very, the geniuses of people walking runway and Vogue performance, the things you saw in the 80s is things you don't see today because the craftsmanship was just different, opposing to, everybody feels fab now. I'm a fab. Everybody feels as if they're so fab that they don't have to be the balls on time, that they're only walking for $3,500. Who came up with this ideology? It's ridiculous. So,
Yeah, the grand prize situation, it is, I do think that, because I've had people honestly tell me, like, I'm not walking a category unless it's $4,000. And it's like, but you're gonna spend over $1,000 getting to that city, getting your effect if it look like something, getting that effect made or making it yourself, and it shouldn't all be about the money, but like you said, look at the times we in. Like when you turn on the radio, every other song is about what?
Money.
So it's just like you kind of have to look at our times and kind of maybe that's what's affecting the scene. But yeah, like hopefully, what I would want is for ballroom people to just take the power back. If you feel like Legendary has kind of like moved in that space, I feel like ballroom people need to make their own Legendary.
And it's a ballroom has always been a $1 million business. Let's talk about what it first takes to put on a ball, what it takes to get everybody here. Let's talk about every flight that's being taken care of. Let's talk about every hotel and not the effects. Let's talk about the tables that we're paying $1,500 for, $600 for, and then what's on the table. The reality of if you let people abuse you, then they will do exactly that. But if you check them at the table, then they will no longer abuse you. So it's kind of like, for me, I'm not going to just buy a $1,000 table just because your house is giving up. I'm going to go to a ball that my house feels as if we need to be there. It's not because it is this person's ball or that person's ball. It's because it's a house, it's a house that we agree upon that we're going to go. And I don't care what the name of that house is. We're going to go support that house. But it's not about the grand prizes. I tell a lot of my kids, and they'll say, well, how much is the grand prize for? I remember we didn't know what grand prize was. I remember the first flyer we looked at was a piece of paper that somebody drew a flyer on. No, that's literally like the first ball I ever went to. And then when I designed, we used to have flyer of the year. And your flyer could get grand prize of the year if you designed that flyer. And so we would get very extravagant with the flyers. I mean, things have changed, but that's what Ballroom was. And then you would go to the clubs and you would pass out your flyer to every person, making it more of a person-to-person contact, and people felt as if you cared about them. Now people come to bars, you look around, you don't know the people. I would know everybody at every table from every house because it was really a ballroom family inside of a family. But now you go to bars, you be like, who the hell is this? Where did this person come from? And they just only hear, it's become a fad, it's fashionable. And so white kids in America and in Europe, and nothing's wrong with that, are taking everything like they normally do. So now you see people voguing in videos. They in Cardi B's video voguing. They in Megan Thee Stallion videos voguing. So it's great. Not that we haven't been in videos prior to that in the Madonna era who tried to claim Vogue, but she didn't create Vogue. She happened to sing about it. This little woman sung about something she saw while she was at Studio 54 with the kids was voguing. You know what I'm saying? So when you look at the history and the irony, everything that we have done have always been taken from us, and then they take it, market it, sell it back to you, tell you to sign on a dotted line, and you get no residual for Legendary. You get no more checks after that. Last check has been cashed out to you. And then you go back home and say, oh, you feel so good. Oh, I was on Legendary. So what happens after that? And then they sell that, they're gonna sell that video back to you in 5 more years, and then they're gonna continue to make money off of that. And none of you people gonna make money. Nobody's gonna make money unless you were an executive on that show. But I mean, I won't even go there. I'm just,
no, you're telling the truth.
Oh, yeah, I'm just saying we have to take back ballroom scene. That's why I recently deemed someone an icon. And I did it out of, you know, saying like, hey, listen, let's shake the tables because y'all falling asleep with ballroom. And ballroom sometimes need to be shaken by its core. And saying, hey, listen, look at me, because that's not something that I normally get into. I don't get into the demon thing. I never get into the politics of ballroom. But I asked myself before I die, I knew that it was going to be someone. Who that was, I did not know. But I knew that it had to be in a time that was a time of irony. And what I mean by that is where we've fallen so asleep into side of ballroom, we forgot what it was. And what it was meant to be for all of us. And so you had to shake the tables. And Deja now, who's a new icon, who is phenomenon for her category, who destroys her category. It's always going to be controversy when deeming someone, but when you, yeah, Little Deja Khan Hervé Léger. She used to be a Khan, and she's the overall mother for the house now, and she's doing a fabulous job. It was well deserved. You know what I'm saying? She has set men, women, transgenders, straight or gay across the board. So when you look at a person of that caliber, then it's undeniable. Yet it shook the table because here it is, a person in the East Coast that comes to the West Coast, and the first time the West Coast was ever to be able to deem somebody from the East Coast when the East Coast ain't never seen the West Coast. Let's keep it real here. Let's talk about the shits. And then for folks to be upset about that, because there is a process in regards of how that goes. But at the end of the day, who came up with all of these rules? Who came up with saying, if you got to walk X amount of balls, you got to, ballroom was never built like that. Ballroom was built to survive off of the ingenuity and the function of the people, all the people, not a selective few, not a handful of people that says, you're worthy, I'm God, now you are icon because I see it. We don't see a whole lot of shit. I walked for over 23 years before I got mine, but it was a different time. So I understand that. Some people have walked only 15, some people have only walked 20. Some people don't have no cash categories or icons. Some people are iconic for no category. You know what I'm saying? Across the board. And I'm not shooting shots at anybody. I'm just saying, when it's your time, it's your time. And when it happens, let it happen and be happy for the next individual. There's so much controversy for the demon situation. People argue and fight over it, but it's the small masses of people in ballroom that control ballroom that try to control how things need to be done. So I broke away from it. So I'm not gonna follow this politics anymore. I'm gonna do what's right for the people, by the people. So, yeah.
So usually, whenever somebody new gets deemed, it's always a lot of controversy on social media afterwards from people that say they don't see the status or, you know, whatever the case is. Why do you think people usually get so mad whenever people get deemed?
I think first what we first must understand is that before the East Coast, before New York, we know that New York is the Mecca. I was always told if you're gonna get your status, you gotta go to New York, you gotta walk there, and that's the place, it's the Mecca. It is. And I think where the East Coast did not see the West Coast and the East Coast didn't see the Midwest, there was a split of division on how things should be done. So what happened is that people start deeming their own people in their own regions, and their own icons, and pioneers start doing their own things everywhere. And then at some point, people started saying, well, we need to come up with this status control. It needs to be an X amount of cash category, the X amount of wins, and X. And the reality is that when I was coming to ballroom, we didn't think about being a legend. We didn't care about being an icon. We didn't care about stars. We didn't care about any of that stuff. We didn't come into ballroom I didn't even know what any of that stuff was. Like, if you had to tell me this is a person of legend, I'd be like, yeah, whatever. Or if you had told me that, if you walk an X amount, nobody thought about that. We just went to balls and battled, and you had fun and you won, and you got other year, and you was like, okay, whatever this is. And then one day, Selvin called you out as a legend. Didn't even get a plaque. And Selvin goes, you do not need to be walking this category anymore. You are legendary. You should be walking with the legendary kids. And Ballroom kind of had function like that, and that comes from the old pre-era of Ballroom. If you thought that you were legendary, then you got up and you hit the floor and you battled the legendary kids, and that was Fizz back then. But now that doesn't happen. You have to be told that you're legendary before you hit the floor. And if you're not that, then the crowd speaks for us. Could you imagine everybody in the crowd waving tens instead of having people on the panel, and let the people vote for the people that's battling so everybody feel a part of that? Ballroom needs to change. It's lost in the sauce. And I believe, with new technology and people being able to use phones and stuff, that people can vote from their houses, and change Ballroom in a way where everybody can still be a part of it and feel good about the process, opposing to a small group of people trying to control the livelihoods of others through being able to make people walk longer for a period of time because you don't see them being deemed for a certain category. So I don't know. I don't have it all right. I have all the answers, but I know if you deal with people who understand winning and you come from a winning culture and you allow that to take place, you can definitely change the impact on people in society by just learning how to win.
So I know you or it's my understanding that you were the first person to bring Prodigy to the Midwest, and now you have started the House of Hervé, Léger.
Correct.
So, number one, what made you leave Prodigy, and number two, why Hervé, Léger now?
Well, leaving Prodigy was a very personal thing to me because it was a house that I started in Detroit, and I did not know that there was a young man by the name of Prodigy in Philly, that had opened up his house with the same name. The history of that is me, Rodney Balmain. Before he was Balmain, he was Rodney Milan. Used to come to a club that I used to run in Detroit called 1X. And we would meet there. He would go to the balls. He was like, man, it's some cats in Philly with the same name. I said, what you talking about? I said, we the only prodigies out here. He said, no, y'all not. It's some people up in New York using the same name. I said, who is it? He said, it's Man. I call Man on the phone. Me and Man get real tight. We get really, really close. Mika's in the house. The first Prodigy of all, the first Prodigy ball, period, was in Detroit. The very first Prodigy ball, Man and Mika actually came to that ball. Prodigy had never had a ball prior to that. And so that relationship between Man was really, really good. I remember calling him on the phone, it was in the summertime, and I said, hey Man, I got this chant. He said, what is it? I said, it's P-R-O-P-R-O-D-I-G-Y. He said, I like that chant. He said, we're gonna use it. And so this chant that I had created became a virus. That spelling out of the name became hypnotic within Ballroom scene because nobody was doing it.
Oh, that was the first time?
That was the first time it had ever happened. So nobody was spelling out their house name at that time. Prodigy was like the first house to kind of just do that, and people would be like, wow, and we were making noise with it. And I started recruiting J-setters. I was recruiting face kids. I was recruiting runway kids. I was recruiting sex sirens. I mean, I was recruiting everything that you could possibly think of, because at that point in time, I wanted to destroy the Dutch boys, because that was the house that told me, you know, it was a financial situation why I left, but something happened. I didn't get my money, so I said, you know what? You're not going to do me like this. So guess what I do? I started my own house, and they laughed at me. So you're gonna start your off like, yeah, right. So, you know, I took a female figure from the house, from their house, and made her the mother of my house. And that's how Prodigy was born. Prodigy was born because I opened up the dictionary and and the first page I turned to was Prodigy. And I turned to my boyfriend, I said, this is gonna be the name. He said, okay. And we went with it. And me and Man, you know, we got along for a very long time. But I left that house in particular just because of me and Jason did not get along. Me and Jason, the overall mother Prodigy, did not necessarily get along when he first came to the house. Jason was actually in jail while the house was still developing. And when he first came out, you know, it was a discrepancy of how the house would be shaped and moved. And don't get me wrong, Jason's a good leader. I think Jason has some great attributes. I would never take anything away from the work or the irony of anything that he has done. But at that point in time, we had a kind of love-hate relationship. And things just kind of went, you know, they just kind of went sour, and I didn't go to a meeting when I moved out here in Cali, and my mother at that time was Stasha Mugler, and I was still young. I was feeling myself. I was like, fuck it, I'm gonna go to Mugler. And that's what happened. I went to Mugler, and I won for a long time as a Mugler. But I think the stupidest thing that I did is that I left a house that I was a part of being co-founder of and didn't understand how history had been moving and shaking the foundation of ballrooms. And I'll be very candid with you, I probably should have never left. But I'm glad that I did because I'm glad that I did leave because when I became a Mugler, I saw a different side of ballroom. And it taught me something different. And after that, and I left Mugler, I began to think about what do I want to do next? I knew I wanted to create my own house again. I didn't know where I was going to do it at. I didn't know what the name was going to be. And I met this great young man by the name of Kyle, who is a princess. And at that point in time, I was an Aphrodite, and he was like, you know, I was like, I can't continue to do this. We need to create something out of magic. And me and him together, and I take nothing away from him because he's one of the founders, and the House of Hervé Léger has quite a few founders. I just don't want to get caught up in the logistics of not saying everyone's name because it'll make somebody feel some kind of way. So I would just say to all of the founders and all the founders in the East and all the founders of the West and our overall mother who's a founder too. Tori's a founder. I have to mention names now because it will get me in trouble. Daryl, Zaza, it's so many. Omega, who's a West Coast founder out here. Tori, Raymond. Who else did I forget? Anybody? I forgot. Toy Alexander. I forgot one of the founders. In the South, you have Coco and Tito. It's a lot of people who contribute to build this House of Hervé Léger. If I forgot somebody's name, I'm sorry. So I didn't do it myself. So we wanted to create a house that was a democracy not where the father has power over the house or the mother, that the house is ruled totally by the entity of the rules that we prescribed and that we vote on. Kind of like how the United States works, that even the overall father, mother could be removed. So we created something that was going to be the next episode of Ballroom. So we are Face, Runway, Realness, House, and we're very boutique. We would probably never have over 85 members. That's just because we want it to be what Ballroom used to be. Ballroom used to be a very small elite team, and you would come in and do your job. Now where you have a house of 500 people in the house and you got more people yelling on the floor than you got people participating in the ball. So we went back to the old days.
Okay. So from here on up, what are your like goals for the House of?
The House of the Goals. I think the House of the Goals, and we talk about this a lot. I had a young man inbox me. He says, "Hey, I really like your house, and what are the house goals?" And I would just be very candid with them. We are here to educate. We are here to help growth. Individuals financially, mentally, or physically. 20% of my kids would talk to you about, a cryptocurrency. The other third of those kids would talk about, I'm running a network or a business. I'm a businessman myself. Oh, Bobby Behave, the underwear line, which is probably is a 6-figure business. excuse me, in which my boyfriend runs, and I am his creative director. But nowadays, ballroom has changed because kids can make money from any avenue from sitting on their couch. It's powerful, you know. It's very powerful. And so through the visionaries of the house and the founders of the house, of Hervé and Léger, we're able to kind of administer that to kids who don't see it that way. I tell kids, fix your credit first. What's your credit score looking like? Well, I don't have no money, but if you fix your credit, you don't need no money. You just need to learn how to have good credit. Now let me show you how to fix your credit, and then after you fix your credit, we're gonna get you a certificate or a degree in something. I don't care if it's nursing school, you're gonna get it in something. So now you're providing means and ways to be able to go to functions. You can't go to functions if you're broke. If you ain't got a job, you can't do it now. You battle on kids who's wearing $3,000 pair of Balenciagas. People ain't stunting them no more. People are really working and getting these clothes now. People ain't breaking in and grabbing racks of clothes like they used to do back in the 80s and run outside with the fur. People are purchasing these things. And so if you're not able to teach someone how to get what you got, then what is ballroom about? Or are you just using kids for a category? And if that's what you're doing, then to me, I don't want to be part of that ballroom. That part of ballroom was not a part of the integrity of core value of who I am. And I hope I didn't forget to mention Deja as the founder of the house. I think I did, the overall mother. She's the founder too. I'm just trying to remember things because I would forget stuff and people would be like, oh, you forgot? And I'll be like, oh, did I forget anybody? So.
Well, yeah, I tell everybody, I don't write these questions down. It's literally just a conversation.
It's a conversation. In those conversations in the community, if you forget something, people hold you accountable for it because you are a leader of the organization, so they expect for you to remember every single thing. But when you're under the lights and cameras, it's a different conversation with yourself because you haven't pre-reqed this. You haven't sat down and thought about everything you're going to say. It's any of these questions. It's just real genuine. You know what I'm saying? So, you know, I appreciate you and I thank you for capturing history.
I definitely appreciate you for being here. I consider you to be like a pioneer of like the Detroit scene, if nothing.
Well, if you talk about pioneers of Sex Siren, then I could take that because when I walked Sex Siren, it wasn't called Sex Siren, it was called Sexy Male. And we kind of revolutionized that category and it became Sex Siren. And so Jack was the person who gave that category its name. Jack was the first person to say Sex Siren. But back then it was called Sexy Males, and the way they battle now, that ain't no battle. We battled. I mean, we picked each other up, we humped each other, we grind, we was in whips and chains, we kissed, we did the whole nine, we came out butt naked. We set the tone. I mean, and it doesn't take away from anything, but you can't go back and look at Wilt Chamber and then compare him to Michael Jordan. Right. There are two different greats. There are two different icons on two different eras, and so you can't say, well, and a lot of people get in the habits of saying, well, I don't see this person because they didn't do what that person did. The thing about being an icon is not that you need to replicate what anybody else has done, is that you need to do your own thing, and if people see it, then it's going to happen. Regardless, you got people who've been crowned icon for a multiple number of things, and not necessarily all for walking. So we're gonna be real about the conversation. So when you say you don't see nobody, look across the board because they're the icon for everything. You got icons who ain't walked, that are icons. You got icons who ain't nothing but paid a bag, that's an icon. You got icons who destroyed their categories, but they're icons. So in ballroom, we have to remember when we're deeming these people, we can't use the same criteria for everybody because nobody has been deemed by the same criteria. We do have one where people say you need to walk as my, but ask some of these folks who became icons, then you're gonna turn around and write a whole bunch of shit for somebody else to do that you didn't do. And then you're gonna hold them accountable for some of the things that you didn't necessarily do. So why are you making it so hard for the next people to get deemed?
I don't even want to say what I think it is, but I'm hopefully it goes through. I'm supposed to interview Kevin Omni on the 27th.
That's my father. Tell him I said hello.
I'm going to New York. I'm going to talk to him. I really want to know where did the demon come from? Because at first I thought maybe it's like maybe the leaders in ballroom was like, well, how do we keep people coming back?
Well, it became,
is it an incentive? Like,
yeah, I think crowning people was an incentive to keep them around for longer. Because if you don't give It's like going to school for 4 years and not getting a diploma.
Yeah.
But imagine somebody told you to go to school for 4 years and you can become a doctor and you need to do X, Y, and Z. Then you would prescribe to that. So Ballroom has fallen into the same situation. You're here, if you walk a number of years, you get this. If you walk longer, so what you keep is that you keep a rotation of people in Ballroom heavily circulating, wanting to achieve that goal of becoming an icon. So that if they tell you you need to be there 10 years, then you got to stay there for 10 years. And then what happens within in this 10 years radius is everybody make it? No. Some people fall off. Some people say forget it. Some people go and come back. Some people be like, and some people get their status, right, and then other people come back and they be like, well, I've been walking for all this time, but I left and I went to jail, but I came back. And I think that now people don't see you anymore because you disappear. See, Ballroom is only about what they can see.
Do you think those people deserve status?
Oh, absolutely. It's almost saying like, you know, the slaves who came here in America, who helped create the railroad for folks to escape, don't deserve the gratitude and respect for what they've done. Only the slaves who made it the last ones who came. That's not fair to say. What's that type of an assertion? You can't make that type of comment. You know what I'm saying? That's a bias. That's a biased comment. You know, I believe that everybody's status is different, and there are some. I like what they're trying to do, but the reality is, if I'm an icon and it's time to deem somebody, I don't need to ask 5 people, do they see it? I don't need to ask 20 people if they see it. I don't. I think the privilege of being an icon, of once you become one, is that you inherit that from which it is given, and now you're able to do the same thing. And I think the politics is when we get into the room and 20 people in there, and you're upset with somebody because you don't want to see their status. And that's just my opinion.
I can feel that. Well, like I said, I want to thank you for coming here, sharing your wisdom. You definitely got a lot of it. I feel like we could sit here for like 6 hours and talk. Like, I really just appreciate all of this. And even just sitting down here, I kind of almost, you opening my eyes up to some things that I never even realized before. So I have one last question I ask everybody when they come here, to describe yourself in 5 words or less.
5 words or less? Genetically genius, God-given faith.
What's up? Ladies and gentlemen, Kage, Hervé, Léger.